All right. Well, the church bells across the street are usually my cue, and I hear them. So I am going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for being with us a week early due to the Memorial Day holiday. But hopefully, it looks like there's a strong number of folks with us regardless. So thank you for being with us. Next month, we will resume our normal fourth Monday scheduling. We'll be talking about manufactured housing. Um, but for today's webinar, we've got our friends with the City of Manassas, Christian Samples, and Trinity Waldron to discuss fast tracking the attainable housing process, a public-private partnership on publicly owned land. So they will be talking about housing development on city land today. I have the CM information for this webinar is still pending. It will be certified, but I do not have that information just quite yet. I will get that to you, whether that's posted on our website page, along with the recording that will be posted on our YouTube, and also I'll make sure it goes out in the follow-up e-blast to all attendees. Um, and before I cover a couple quick logistical items, thank you as always to the Berkeley Group for sponsoring this webinar series. Here's our website, and I'll also put that in the chat in just a moment, along with that link to the YouTube page that I mentioned, where you can find all previously recorded webinars in the series and this webinar by the end of the week. We really do encourage questions. Please submit your questions through the Q&A box. That will just help us keep track of all inquiries. And once we do get to that formal Q&A period at the end, if you'd prefer to ask your question out loud, you're welcome to use the raise hand feature. And by doing so, I would unmute you, and you can ask your question out loud if you'd prefer to do that. But otherwise, feel free to submit your questions as we go. I'll leave the chat box open if there's, ever an opportunity for some open-ended discussion, or if you need to DM me for any technical assistance, happy to help. Um, I think that about covers it in terms of just the housekeeping items. Well, you'll find a few links in the chat box as soon as I hand it over. But thank you for being with us. I think we have a great webinar ahead, and I will pass it over to Christian and Trinity. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Jillian. Christian Samples here, Planning Manager for City of Manassas, joined by Trinity Waldron, our Housing and Neighborhood Coordinator, and I will get our slideshow going. Share screen. Give me a moment here. Share. There we go. Okay, so today we're presenting Fast Tracking the Attainable Housing Process, a public-private partnership on publicly owned land. So the scope of this presentation is to discuss our experience with a affordable housing developer that we are working with on a piece of property here in the city. So the presentation is going to go very large in terms of just the city as a whole, and then we're going to gradually reduce down to the actual project itself and talk about lessons learned. So the City of Manassas was founded in 1873 as a town and became a full-fledged city in 1975. We are part of the Washington, D.C. metro area, kind of located in a little corner by Prince William County. We're a small city of 10 square miles with a population of 42,976. We have a very diverse population. 45% of our residents are Hispanic. So we do have quite a diverse population here in the city. We're very blessed and lucky in the city to have our own infrastructure. We have our own water, sewer, power utilities. We have our own municipal airport, and we do provide our own police and fire services. Our slogan is Historic Heart, Modern Beat, and it's something we live to here in the city. Our city is very rich in history from the Civil War to the present. We have a very vibrant downtown with festivals all year long. We're also well known for our 4th of July celebration. We have a transit hub here in the city with VRE and Amtrak service. And we do have our municipal airport, which will be transitioning to commercial service in 2 years. So hopefully you'll have another option to fly to Disney World. As I mentioned, our population is 42,976, but we are a growing city. By 2030, we're expected to be at 47,039 people. So you can see over the past 20 years, we have been growing quickly. 29% of our city residents are renters, and of those 29%, just under half of them are cost burden, which means that they pay more than 30% of their income towards housing, utilities, etc. Part of that challenge stems from the fact that we've not been building as fast as we should over the past 20 years. So, a little bit of history in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we were building very consistently. We were building a lot of single family homes, mostly with townhomes as well, a few apartments. The slowdown started happening around year 2000, and then we had a bump up between 2001 2007. The recession hit really hard. And so since then, we really have not recovered well enough to say that we're building enough housing for our residents' needs. The one blip on the map or the chart you see there is from 2017. Those are apartment buildings slash townhomes slash two over twos that were built actually as part of this project, and we'll get into that in a little bit.
So as Christian was showing, that was actually previous data from our 2023 Housing and Trust Fund study. So just to go over some more current data, this didn't really change in 2024 or 2025. And majority of the housing stock that was developed was in fact single family attached or detached homes. And that's majority of the homes within the city of Manassas, as you can see, as a part of our housing stock. And pretty much all of the housing that's been developed within the past 10 years has been for market rate housing rather than affordable. So along with these regional targets, as you can see, we have not been hitting the production mark according to any of the regional studies that have been done. So most of the targets, especially within the past 10 years, have requested for the city of Manassas alone to hit about 620 homes a year. And in actuality, we've just been hitting 171 homes a year within our actual production. As you can see, like I said before, this has slowed down quite a bit. And with the entire DC metro region of itself, we're incorporated in the Prince William County area. And so with affordable housing units alone, we have about a 5,000 affordable unit shortage. And so with this, we have to get innovative and kind of how we determine how to develop affordable housing or preserve affordable housing, especially being that the city has a 2% vacancy rate. And as Christian said before, we only have 10 square miles and not a lot of publicly owned land. So we have to determine how innovative ways that we're going to build on that land. And as I was stating before, we're part of the Washington metro area, area median income that's determined by HUD every year. So as you can see, this is a fairly high number. The area median income for a household, typically of four, is 166,100. However, if you look at the city of Manassas alone, our own median income is around 113,000. And so when you look at our median housing price, which is around 449,000, the qualifying income is much larger than the median income of the city of Manassas alone. And then our fair market rent that's also determined by HUD for a two-bedroom is around $2,600. So more likely, according to our median income for the city of Manassas alone, people are able to qualify more often for rent than they are to be a homeowner within today's age.
So the city, through our direction, through our leadership, has been taking steps to address housing. And the first step we took was in 2022. We did some significant overhaul to our zoning ordinance to address housing. We actually defined affordable housing in the code. We added missing middle housing types such as live-work units and cottage courts. We simplified and decreased setbacks for townhomes and apartment buildings. The challenge there was that our setbacks were simply too large to be feasibly developable. So we adjusted those setbacks to make it more feasible to develop. We also reduced parking for multifamily down to 1.5 spaces per unit. I believe the previous was 2.5. So it's quite a significant step to reduce that parking. Another step we took was taking advantage of the Code of Virginia authorizing language that allowed us to waive fees. So we, through our city council, passed a fee waiver ordinance for affordable housing, meaning if you're developing units, be it in a standalone project or with a mixed use project, and those units are 80% or below of AMI and will be held to affordability for 30 years, then you do not pay building fees, which translates for a developer, it's about $10,000 to $15,000 per unit. So you can imagine in a large project, those add up pretty quickly. Another step we've taken is we've accelerated our permitting and entitlement processes. So we've taken steps to make sure those processes move much faster. On the entitlement side, we work very closely with our development partners to basically have a lot of meetings prior to formal applications so that by the time we get an application, there really isn't much of a staff review. We can simply put it through the public hearing process. So that has reduced entitlement time by a lot. And we've also accelerated our permitting process. So our permits, be it site plan, be it building plan, they're not sitting for months and months and months. We're actively reviewing them quickly and giving that feedback to developers quickly so that they can keep the process moving. Within development proffers, City Council has authorized waivers of proffers for the cash proffers as well as for infrastructure. So one example, we recently had a project about 2023 come through for veterans housing. And so the city council waived all cash proffers for that, as well as waived infrastructure to be developed for that. So we simply asked them to set aside the right of way necessary so that the city could go in and do that. So we found that approach to be successful, and that's something I think we're going to do in the future. We have a housing investment fund. That fund was funded by ARPA funds a few years ago at the tune of about $2 million, although we're certainly hoping to grow that, and Trinity will talk more about that in a moment. We started a housing advisory board to give housing advice to city council as well as guide housing policy. We've hired a housing and neighborhood coordinator. Our 2045 comprehensive plan update, we just finished that back in October. The previous comprehensive plan, our 2040 plan, focused on creating more market rate units. The perception at the time in 2019, 2020 was that the city did not have enough market rate units. That has obviously changed. And so now we're focusing more on creating affordable units within that plan. We've also undertaken focused housing studies, such as the trust fund study that we did, as well as a downtown housing study, and we have more to come.
As you can see on the map, it shows our current LIHTC units as well as some that we have seen, some properties that we have seen as like potential. So on the properties that are notated as our LIHTC properties, we have 6 within the city of Manassas. 4 out of the 6 LIHTC properties are actually expiring within the next 10 years, one of which is expiring next year and has already considered interest in converting to market rate. So out of all of these 6 properties, 5 of the properties are actually owned by for-profit developers. One of the properties has renewed their credits, which was recently in 2021, and that is one of the senior only / age restricted properties. And so a part of these potential properties within the LIHTC on the blue there, one of the properties is actually the one that we're going to be talking about today that we had previously looked at or studied as a potential for LIHTC or affordable units to add to the city of Manassas.
So now we'll be getting into the actual larger scale development, give you context of where this affordable housing development will be located. So this is the landing at Cannon Branch. It was entitled in 2016 as a mixed-use development. There have been several concepts before, including a much larger, more intense development, but this is where council settled in 2016. So this was city-owned land that was developed as a public-private partnership with Buchanan Partners. And the scope of it is that there would be it's entitled for 500 residential units, and then has a mix of commercial on the other side of the street. So you see on the north side of Gateway Boulevard, there's an anchor tenant, there's retail, there's office, there's more residential and whatnot. The location, to give you some context, it's nearby the Manassas Airport, it's nearby Micron, Lockheed Martin, and then GMU, Prince William County, as well as nearby the 234 on-ramp, which gives convenient access to I-66. And it's located within 2 miles of downtown Manassas. Since 2016, we've seen development of 279 townhome and condominium units. So if you look at that GDP, the south side there, all of those residential units, townhomes and 2/2s have been developed. A hotel has been developed. A 20,000 commercial building has also been developed. This development ran into some challenges, however, and I'll show in the next slide. This is what it looks like today. So you can see the landing at Cannon Branch. You see all those townhomes have been developed, but the bulk of the site really has not been developed. So what's on there now is the hotel and those units and the 20,000 square foot commercial building. But there's also an old Department of Motor Vehicles building as well that will need to come down. So what you're seeing there is that it didn't quite develop as we hoped to. A lot of that was due to market conditions. So as you saw in the previous slide, there was quite a bit of office space there. And as we know, post-COVID economy, office is not at a premium anymore. The nature of retail has changed. The anchor tenant that we were hoping was going to go, they're pulled out. So what this left us with was a partially developed site. So this site, while not connected to the development we're going to talk about in a moment, is going through a proffer amendment in order to reconfigure some of the commercial component to be more viable, as well as add a park and trail.
So, Good Housing Virginia is a nonprofit developer, typically located in the Northern Virginia region. They first proposed this development to the community development team and city council in September of 2025. So, just in general, they proposed a 100-unit affordable rental development for 1 and 2 bedrooms for 40 to 70% of the area median income. And so along with this affordable development, they were, of course, going to provide the usual 1.5 parking spaces in conjunction with city code, amenity spaces inside of the property, as well as a tot lot on the outside space. And along with this, they initially requested, as a part of the land sale, so the land itself at the old DMV site is worth $3 million. So that would somewhat be waived and be kind of contributed as a revolving loan that would go back into the housing investment fund. So that was the initial proposal made by Good Housing Virginia. So since this proposal, City Council has considered and also provided some public participation. So 6 community meetings, both in person and virtually, have been held for the community just to provide feedback, criticism, and as well as get any clarification on questions that they may have. A part of these 6 community meetings, majority have been located across from that townhome community that already lives there. So that landing at Cannon Branch, which is a market rate townhome and condo community. And so this Chamber of Commerce office building is within that commercial space that's located directly across from that landing at Cannon Branch community. And so along with this public participation, the city council, as well as other boards and commissions and the city residents themselves, were invited to do community tours of some of the good housing development projects that had already been done in Loudoun County. And so there had been multiple tours that were conducted in person, both on foot and through a bus that was provided by Good Housing LLC. And so City Council was able to see the product that Good Housing provided throughout Loudoun County that they had already developed before. And then it was also offered to the city residents, especially the landing at Cannon Branch residents, for anyone who wanted to see the product for themselves. So there was a lot of community input and kind of coordination that was put into this, but although that was provided, there were some challenges. The natural skepticism from the commercial units across the street not being built up enough. There was the initial anchor, as Christian was saying, that eventually pulled out and actually went under due to the fact of the challenges of COVID. And so there was some skepticism of there not being enough commercial space for this community in order to support the incoming residents. And on top of that, the natural skepticism that comes with affordable housing, which is the decrease in property value as well as the increase in crime. So as a part of this feedback, there's a larger proffer development that's going on around the landing at Cannon Branch. And so this gave the city an opportunity to include in those proffers some more community spaces, as well as a walking trail along that waterfront that was behind that commercial space there. So this is kind of where we are at the moment. So after consideration, feedback, and finally council approval for the purchase and sale agreement. So it initially got pushed back after the February 9th city council meeting, just to give the community a little bit more time to digest and get another HOA meeting actually in with the good housing provider. And then it was finally approved by City Council on February 23rd. Along with this approval, we have provided building fee waivers, tap fee waivers, and then the consideration of a loan financing through the Housing Investment Fund is currently underway. So about $500,000 throughout the Housing Investment Fund is considered to be going into this project, along with 2.5 million of capital reserves. Just to give them a little bit more robust background once they apply for those LIHTC units. And so this is actually in conjunction with our presentation today. City Council will have a work session tonight about the elevations that we're showing you currently. So as you can see, the tot lot is there in the front. We've worked hard with the landing at Cannon Branch to get kind of the architecture correct. So this will go to City Council tonight on their work session along with their our housing ordinance. So the housing ordinance that we'll be going through tonight will be an approval potentially of the city to be allowed to provide loans for affordable housing development in general.
So our next steps for the Good Housing Project is the site plan is currently under review, and we're anticipating approval of that in July. As Trinity mentioned, the City Council and Good Housing are finalizing the property sale and the financing terms, with sale closing and groundbreaking in winter of 27, and then completion with certificates of occupancy by winter of 28. So there were a few lessons that we learned through this process, and I'm going to go through them with you guys. So to be proactive in planning, build relationships early and often, continue to review ordinances and policies, establish a housing investment fund, hire a housing coordinator, establish a housing advisory board, and that public participation is key. So being in a webinar full of planners, we don't have to say that planners need to be forward thinking. We got that covered. But our policymakers definitely need a little help. We're very lucky here in the city that we have very forward-thinking policymakers. They had the forward thinking in 2016 to set aside some of the property for residential use, and have the foresight now to consider affordable housing as a part of that. But not every policymaker is like that. Throughout here in Virginia and other jurisdictions, your policymakers come from a wide variety of backgrounds. So being able to urge them to be more forward thinking and really meet them at their level is key to success. Here in Manassas, we regularly interact with our city council and mayor and have lots of opportunities to talk about projects and to urge them to be forward thinking. The second point, being proactive, is identify within your comprehensive plan and your housing plans potential publicly owned property that could be developed. So the main thing here is that we, when we redid our 2045 plan, we added that LIHTC map you saw that showed those potential publicly owned properties as well as existing LIHTC properties, those potential ones that could be developed. Within our housing plan, going back to 2019, some of those sites were identified, but also guidance was given on how to develop housing in the city, and we've been using that guidance since then. So we also did, as soon as we had the Housing Trust Fund money realized, we commissioned a study on how best to use that money, as well as options for CDBG funds. So that study was monumental in providing guidance. And that study also included recommendations for creating a housing advisory board in order to guide how that money will be spent. We've also commissioned more focused studies. We commissioned a study last year for using our MW HAP grant to study affordable housing downtown. We studied a publicly owned site as well as a privately owned site for affordable housing. So the guidance from that study will actually end up applying to future developments as well. Um, and then when you're considering these studies, really consider how do I put this? Basically, don't overstudy the problem. The main thing there is that when we're doing these studies, we have an end goal in mind. Like we're going to listen to the data, but we do have a purpose for this data. What we don't want to do is create a public perception where we're studying the problem, but we're not taking any action. So we do recommend taking decisive action quickly. Building relationships is very key to this. So public-private partnerships are critical to the success of developing publicly owned property. What we realize here in the city is that we're not a landlord and we're not a developer. We have publicly owned property that we'd like to see put to much better use, but that we're not going to take on that role. We do need a private partner with that experience to help guide us. And so when we look for partnerships, we're not looking for the one that's going to make us the most money. We're looking for the one that's going to provide the most public benefit. So when we partnered with Buchanan Partners in 2016, that was how the city council saw them, as being a partner that not only would help develop the site, but really align with what the city's interests are. So we've applied the same scrutiny to good housing as well. Their vision is aligned very much with the city's vision for affordable housing or attainable housing here in the city. Second thing to remember is that every interaction, however small, is an opportunity to build relationships. With my job as a whole, whether you come in for a shed or code enforcement got you for something, I'm not there to just get your project out the door. I'm there to build a relationship with you and to hopefully create more positive relationships in the future. So with the good housing example, we're still building that relationship. So far, it's been very positive, but the hope is that number one, that will lead to other projects with them in the future. And number two, that other developers will see our relationship and will want to work with the city as well. Another important thing about building relationships is not to forget about your team and to build collaborative relationships with your team. We don't have a large staff here in the city. There's a small group of planners here, but we have a very collaborative relationship as well as collaborative relationships with other departments. So we all work together on these projects. So not necessarily getting caught up in your realm or your divided responsibility, but everybody needs to bring their experience to the table and collaborate. That includes with your policymakers as well. And hopefully you can build a collaborative relationship with them, as well as building collaboration with the public. Another thing we learned is to address conflicts between relationships, especially the public. So the big challenge here in being the property owner and the regulator is that there's a conflict there. And so how we've been able to address that address that perception problem with the public is that we're very transparent. So we don't really hide anything. Everything that the public sees is what we know. So there's really no surprises for anybody. And our council has been very clear about that they want everything to be as transparent as possible. And that's something I think we're very proud of. So something else to consider is continuous review of your processes and monitoring your ordinance and application processes and impacts. So being detached from those processes and those impacts will create unnecessary delays, because if you simply make an ordinance or create an application process and just let it go without considering its impacts constantly, what you're going to find is you're going to have a slowdown in your processes as well as some distrust from your development community. So we did take a lot of action in 2022, but we find that we're still learning the impacts of that ordinance and we're still addressing them. Feedback from the public and the development community is absolutely critical to success. So even minor suggestions should not be ignored. When we did these public outreach meetings, we did consider all of the public input, good or bad, reasonable or unreasonable, we did consider it and acknowledge it. And we worked with the public to take those suggestions and shape them into a better product. And I think we're very proud of that. That communication, that feedback process has helped us build better communication with the HOA and the public. Considering your available resources and how best to utilize them, as a small city, we don't have a lot of money. We don't have a large staff, but there are things that we can control. We can control public land for development, which I've already talked to you about, but we can also control the pace of developments and as well as community outreach. So we've managed to shrink down our processes quite a bit. So a typical rezoning for us and or special use permit from time you apply for formally to the time you get your final hearing at council is between 3 and 6 months. It's not to say we're miracle workers, but the key to that is really meeting with your developers early before they get started on the process, rather than just have them throw something at you and review it on the back end. We're meeting with them constantly. It does take a lot of energy and time for us to do that, but what we find is that we get a better application, one that's been vetted very well with staff. So by the time they apply, the staff review is large and minimal. We've already had the staff review, and we can focus more on that hearing aspect as well as gathering that public feedback. And mistakes happen, but mistakes are opportunity for growth. And I'll point out a couple that we had issues that we had. So as Trinity mentioned, there were challenges to that proffered plan that I showed you. It didn't develop the way that we had hoped it to develop. And so the challenge there was a public perception when people were very distrusting of anything that was going to go in there because they're tired of waiting for what was promised. And so what we've had to do is go through a proffer amendment to help fix that commercial component. Has nothing to do with good housing, but inevitably those things are going to get linked by the public. And so we've done our best to make sure that despite them not being connected, we're still doing that public outreach with people. The second issue we had was that while we did waive the building fees, or we're going to, as a staff, we didn't fully appreciate the cost of tap fees for something like this. So those water and sewer tap fees are quite spendy and can definitely impact affordable housing. So we've managed to address this with good housing. However, we're looking at ways to address this in other projects in order to make sure that the needs of our utilities are met, but also the viability of affordable housing developments are done well.
So, as Christian was saying, we as a city don't have much money. We're also not an entitlement community. So we don't directly receive CDBG funds. We actually have a cooperative agreement with Prince William County for them to serve City of Manassas residents with their CDBG funds solely through down payment and rehab. So a few years ago, City Council set aside $2 million from federal ARPA funds specifically for housing opportunities. And so in 2008, these funds were attempted to be utilized for down payment and closing costs specifically for employees. And so this process was supposed to be used for around 6 families. As a result of not having capacity and eligibility of most of the families, only 2 families were served throughout this program. So the funding really sat there for a while, which is why the 2023 Housing Trust Fund study was done. So the study, as a result, provided the opportunity to create the housing coordinator position, as well as the housing advisory board, to advise City Council on how to continue to have some type of funding or revenue within this funding stream as the small city that we are. So a part of the loan provided to Good Housing, there is supposed to be a revenue of about $350,000 annually as a result that will go back into the Housing Investment Fund and eventually provide funding for future projects or programs that we decide to form through advisement of the Housing Advisory Board. And so as I was stating, the Housing Advisory Board that was first established just a few months ago, November of 2025. So it's comprised of 6 members. They're all City of Manassas residents, but they all have a housing advocacy background. So they all utilize a very specific role in order to advise City Council on these opportunities of investment. And so they'll, by the end of the year, they'll form a report that will advise City Council on rental or home ownership opportunities, housing preservation opportunities, as well as potential ordinance adoptions or amendments to ordinances that we already have, specifically dealing with housing in order to combat the challenges or the issues we may have or the barriers for affordable housing. So along with this, the housing coordinator position actually wasn't approved by City Council, part of the budget, until 2024. After about a year of the City of Manassas interviewing, I was officially awarded the position in June of 2025 as the housing and neighborhood coordinator for the City of Manassas. So as a part of this position, I am the staff liaison for the Housing Advisory Board. So any of the data and the kind of information that they need to back up their advice to City Council, I provide that. And then direct updates to any of the housing studies or plans, establishing relationships with for-profit, local for-profit, nonprofit entities, as well as identifying state or federal funding leverages. As I said before, we only have that $2 million. So if there's any other monies that we're able to tap into, that is kind of critical as a leverage for a locality. I'm also a direct point of contact for all of the HOAs and neighborhood leadership within the City of Manassas. There's above, I believe, 50 HOAs, established HOAs within the City of Manassas. And so that's a lot for just 10 square miles. And then, of course, that inclusion or amendments to any of the housing ordinances that relates to the state-approved legislature.
And finally, the last lesson of this is that public participation is key. Without public participation, the public part of the public-private partnership is hollow. So these partnerships do not live in a bubble once the entitlement is granted and construction starts. The partnership, especially on the public side, it needs to be maintained. And so we don't treat this as just a partnership of city leadership and a developer. This is a partnership of the citizens of Manassas, the city leadership, and the developer. And so in the case of good housing, because the property was already entitled for those units and affordability did not require public hearing, we were not under any legal obligation to do notification to the public. However, city leadership decided that it was absolutely key to start that outreach and to inform the public of the good housing proposal and get their feedback on it, because again, they are the public in that public-private partnership. How you gather that feedback does matter. We like Zoom. It's a great tool for these meetings. However, you need to meet people on the ground and you need to actually meet with them in person. People, at least in my experience, tend to do better when they're face to face. They are a lot more honest. They will give you, I think, better feedback than being on a Zoom call. And then meeting the people where they are and not where the project is. So what I mean by that is that you have to meet people at their altitude, so at their life experience, and rather than just at where the project is. So simply throwing what I call the alphabet soup at people and throwing really pretty visuals. It works, it gets the information out, but it doesn't actually meet the public where they are. So you have to meet that, that secretary where that person is, or meet that, data scientist or that developer or what have you. You have to meet them at their level because they're going to have all kinds of concerns. They're all going to be vastly different. That's one thing that we learned through this process, is that the residents of Lanier Canyon Branch have a wide variety of backgrounds. Some are retired, some are very tech oriented, some are just, like I said, just like a secretary or whatnot. So we were able, I feel, to meet the public where they are. Public participation is critical, but you can't make everyone happy. And I think everybody on this call knows no one's ever going to be completely happy. So the main thing is that when we did this outreach, the goal was to solicit feedback and to try our best to incorporate that feedback into the proposal. But some of the feedback we did get was, some people did not want affordable housing, period. Some people were very concerned that renters of any kind would cause crime. Some people were very surprised to hear that the property across the street from them was entitled for additional residential development. And so ultimately, we're not going to make everybody happy, but What we can do is walk through the proposal, get their feedback, incorporate what we can, and recognize that, opposition will still be there, but we're going to do our best. And finally, continuing to gather public feedback after the project is completed. So we're going to keep doing that even after this project is built. We're still going to be reaching out to the public to get their feedback, especially as that commercial component develops. We're going to continue to do that. And one thing, the great thing about having kind of a constant feedback is not only learning what the needs of the public are, it's also building relationships, kind of circling back to that. So one particular example, what we learned through the public outreach part was that the neighborhood across the street there, that landing at Cannon Branch, did not have their own meeting room for an HOA, for their HOA functions or whatnot. So the developer offered their meeting room inside that development. So when it's built, they'll be able to actually come over, use the space for their meetings and whatnot. And that concludes our presentation. We're very grateful for APA Virginia giving us the opportunity to present this, and we're very happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christian and Trinity. That was a great presentation, and we've had a number of questions come in, so we can dive right into those. Um, Alrighty. Well, going back to the start of the presentation, and I mean, you did cover this a little bit in terms of just public feedback, but this touches on something more specific. An anonymous attendee asked, do you face pushback from residents who think that Manassas is shouldering more than its fair share of affordable housing?
So that's how council thought during the 2040 comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2020. So that process took 3 years to complete, and that was the thinking as well as hearing from the public then that yes, Manassas is the affordable housing location. We have affordable housing in Manassas, so why do we need to build more? So the comprehensive plan, the housing chapter did not focus on affordable housing. As soon as the post-COVID period hit, interest rates went through the roof, and prices went through the roof. Suddenly, affordable housing was on everybody's radar. So, are we still facing pushback? We are still facing some pushback, but what we're finding is that less, we're getting more positive, feedback from the public that affordable housing is needed from both owners and renters. People are thinking of their kids as well as their older family members and friends that are getting their start or are retiring and need that affordable housing.
Thank you, Christian. David Levy asks, how did you determine that you need 5,000 affordable units? How many affordable units, as you define it, does Manassas have now? I can't recall. Did you guys have a slide on the numbers, or could you pull up those by chance?
Yeah, I'll let Christian pull up that, but I can also just answer that question while he's pulling that up. So that was actually determined by MWCOG. So MWCOG's a regional entity. They gather data and information on multiple of the jurisdictions throughout the Washington metro area. And so for the Prince William County area, it was determined that there was a shortage of 5,000 affordable units. The city of Manassas happens to be a part of that Prince William County area. And so that's how the 5,000 units are determined. For the city of Manassas itself, it's of course a much lower number. However, if we want to determine, or we say quote unquote affordable units, so let's just say our LIHTC units at the moment, the city of Manassas has, out of the 6 properties, 572 affordable units. The majority of them are 1 and 2 bedroom units, and they typically serve 50 and 60% AMI. By next year, about 68 of those units, as I was saying before, will probably be gone due to the market rate, or due to the owner currently not being interested in continuing its tax credits and converting to market rate. And do you still need us to pull up that slide?
No, not necessarily. Thank you. I think that was super helpful. Thanks, Trinity. Um, Alrighty. I'm looking at some of these questions I think you guys kind of covered in terms of funding. Um, let's see. Mark McCaskill asks, is the City of Manassas thinking of getting involved with any new tech or innovative development, such as modular 3D printed homes, on city-owned land?
Absolutely. So we are definitely open to that. Some of that we're going to have to coordinate with our building department because ultimately they're the folks that are going to have to ensure that they're safe. But we are definitely open to alternative construction methods. We currently have a market rate development off Grant Avenue here in the city that is doing modular construction. So they're actually building part of the parts of the units offsite and then simply just assembling them here, and they meet building code. So we are definitely open to alternative construction, 3D printing, provided that it's safe.
Cool, thank you. Um, all right, another question from David. David says, you indicated speeding up the process by taking care of issues before application, allowing the applicant to move forward quickly to the public hearing process. Because you referenced proffers, I assume that the public hearings are in service of rezonings. The question is, do you have any locations where projects can be built by right without public hearings? Are any properties zoned to allow such development?
So this property.
So this one in particular, yes. So building this particular property, the good housing component of it, the affordability component, does not require a public hearing to develop it. That entitlement was done back in 2016. So affordability was not prohibited by the proffer, so that's allowed to go forward. Other sites in the city, that's a challenge for us for sure, that we're working through. And that's part of the Housing Advisory Board's job is to help us figure out how to better develop without having to go through a rezoning, special use permit, et cetera. So that's something we're actually working on now.
Thank you. Megan Van Dam says, great presentation and good luck tonight. Can you talk more about which development fees are waived that compromise the 10 to 15,000 per unit that you mentioned? Also, which infrastructure would be required a development that is also waived? How is the city otherwise handling the cost of these and constructing them, assuming they need to be timed with the development?
Absolutely. So we'll start with the fee itself. So what that $10 to $15,000 is a typical building fee that you would pay to during the building permit process. So it's that review fee plus the actual building fee. It ends up being around 10 to 15, could be a little less, could be a little more, but it's just a rough ballpark. And then the infrastructure, how do we, I guess, which infrastructure would be required that would also be waived? So um, what the guidance we've gotten from council is that it's appropriate to waive that infrastructure, provided that there's not an impact to public health, provided that we can align it with our CIP. So as we're going through neighborhoods, as we're going through the city, if we're already going to build the sidewalk anyway in 5 years, we're already going to do the street widening and all that. Why are we going to make the affordable developer do it if we're already on our way to doing that? So rather than make them speed up a project, we're just going to wait. We're going to put in that infrastructure and time it with our CIP. Um, we have not had an instance so far where it hasn't been timed with our CIP, although if we do have that, we will definitely have that discussion and figure that out too.
That was very helpful. Thank you. Alrighty, let's see. A Janice Ashley asks, how did you explain to the electeds and public how the project concept went from a mixed income, mixed use planned unit development to a much more basic plan? Was the original concept just not financially feasible?
These might be both of us doing this. So you want to go first, or you want me?
I'll let you go
You want
ahead.
me to? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So what we did in this particular case, explaining to our elected officials and the public. So we have our economic development department, and council has been aware for a while that feasibility on the site's been challenging. So it's been on their mind for many years. It's just when good housing came, it presented more of an opportunity to reach out to the public about really acknowledging that challenge more explicitly, as well as bringing a solution forward. Again, the Good Housing Project is not a part of that proffer amendment going on now to make the commercial component more viable. But the opportunity was there to speak to them. So rather than have both of those projects in a bubble, both were brought forward to talk to them about that. And was the original concept just not financially feasible? In 2016, it was. In 2020 and beyond, it was not. And the big problem is that Post-COVID, no one wants an office. Most companies are renting existing space or having employees work from home. So there's not really a big demand other than in major cities for office space. And then retail, as we had mentioned, that anchor fell apart. So we're not getting a retail anchor there. And the retail component is being reevaluated to where it can create spaces that are more feasible. Because at the end of the day, the people that are there, we recognize they purchased their homes based on that plan. That plan was marketed to them. And so I can definitely understand that if you bought into that vision and it doesn't happen, there's a lot of disappointment there. So the city is really trying to right that ship and create something viable for that neighborhood.
Thank you. Amy O'Hara asks, how is transportation access to the hub and downtown locations planned to be provided to residents?
So that's a great question. Our transportation planner is currently on maternity leave. She would be the best person to answer this question. So I would like to actually take that back to her. Top level, though, unfortunately, it's going to be mainly auto oriented to get to downtown at this point. Although I will say that our transportation planner, Chloe, has been working very diligently to get bicycle trails put in, multi-use pathways. And we do have a pathway network that connects to downtown. So I think bike ped is a viable option as well. But as far as more public transit options, I think Chloe's going to be the best person to answer that, and I will take that to her. And
Thank
yeah, I'm right. Yep.
Thank you for passing that along. And that sort of ties into another question that we had received. You mentioned auto. Does the city reduce the parking minimum for affordable Did the city reduce the parking minimum for affordable housing? Apologies if I missed that from Amy.
So in 2022, with our ordinance amendments, we reduced our parking for multifamily to 1.5, which is typically what we see for affordable housing in the region. As you all know, the General Assembly did pass a new law, especially concerning the designated areas within a half mile of transit that requires specific parking within transit. So our this particular development's not within that transit hub area. However, the ones downtown would be subject to that. That said, though, with other developments in the future, the parking waiver that the General Assembly put in for outside of designated areas is something we're looking to put in. It's actually in our current code amendments that are going forward to council in July or late June. So we are integrating those changes early for that very purpose, so that when we do have an affordable developer come forward, we can actually take into account what's going on site versus a prescribed table in the code.
Thank you. And another segue, General Assembly, Senate Bill 388 was sort of flagged in these questions. Mark McCaskill asks, do you anticipate any faith-based organizations or nonprofits taking advantage of the new Yes in God's Backyard law, and developing housing on their land as complementary housing supply to what the city is doing on public land?
Yeah, I think this is something that we've received interest on already by a multitude of our religious organizations in the city. It's something that obviously the Planning Commission and Housing Advisory Board is talking about, and we'll actually have a joint session in August. So based on the comments during that August session and how that results, that those comments will be provided to City Council in adopting that ordinance. Yep.
Thank you. All right. Sorry, um, some of these questions have sort of been covered. All right. An anonymous attendee. Great job, Christian and Trinity, for your expiring LIHTC units, or LIHTC, sorry, excuse me. Where did you get this data? Do you have a plan for addressing the other expiring LIHTC buildings?
Yeah, so we already had, luckily, this data on hand, but if you go into Virginia Housing's archive folder for their LIHTC applications or awardants, they also provide pretty much all of the information on the number of units based on the LIHTC development's name. That is kind of how we determine the data. And then, sorry, I didn't get the second part of that question.
Uh,
Oh, I
pla-
see it now. Yeah. Do you
just
plan on
go
addressing?
ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. So this is actually something that is on the forefront of the housing advisory boards. I guess, priorities in terms of LIHTC preservation. I just submitted an application to Virginia Housing to get a grant to do a LIHTC preservation study. And then, of course, the part of the General Assembly bill is the right of refusal. So that's something the Housing Advisory Board is looking into and making recommendations to City Council on.
Thank you. All right. Another question. It's interesting to hear about the previous development proposal that fizzled out because of economic circumstances, COVID, etc. Considering this uncertainty of today's economy, are there any measures that you're taking or considering in order to ensure that this project is carried through during a time of economic uncertainty?
So the good housing component, I think, will stand for itself, but we'll talk about the commercial component. So the proffers that are being put forth, they are really designed to be more flexible. So the original phasing plan was very rigid. Certain things had to happen in order for other things to happen. For example, the housing units you saw on the south side there had to be built prior to other improvements being put in. In this case, though, both the city and developer recognize the uncertainty in the economy and not sure, obviously, where ultimately things are going to land, have built flexibility in those proffers so they can, the city and the development partner, we can build phases early. So if a tenant comes in and says, hey, I want a restaurant, rather than waiting for phase three, we can bump it up to phase two. But there are still guardrails to that. So um, the housing units will still need to be built, as well as there's a park that's going to be built and a trail, and those will definitely need to be built prior to certain other parts of that phasing plan happening. So it's kind of a mix of flexibility with some firm boundaries.
Thank you. A question just came in from Joan Duckett. Does the City of Manassas assess at the market rate or affordable sales price? And do you reduce the real estate taxes on your affordable units?
So that's a great question. I think that's something for our Commissioner of Revenue to answer. I will say that, to my knowledge, there isn't a tax reduction on affordable units. That's something I believe is being explored by Council and the Commissioner of Revenue. So that's something that we can take back to Joni offline.
That would be appreciated. All right. I mean, Trinity, I know that you have eyes on the chat as well. I think some of these remaining ones have been touched on already. Is there anything else that you two would like to expand upon? Um,
I would just say, thank you again for the opportunity to present. And, here in Virginia, I feel like all of us work as a team and all of our housing problems are a little different. So we certainly encourage anyone on this call, you reach out to us. We are available to help with your projects, answer any questions you have, share our experiences, as well as learn about what you guys are doing. And so we can all work as a team to, better people's lives here in Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. And I just saw a comment from Latoya Gray come in. Way to go, Trinity, for representing MERPS so well. Congratulations on your position, and thanks to the both of you for sharing this amazing project with us.
Yep.
Thanks, Latoya.
Thank you.
And David also says, I appreciate all your answers, Manassas friends. So many thanks. Oh, and I'm missing a bunch. Plenty of thank yous and hellos coming in. So um,
Awesome.
wonderful presentation. Thank you both for sharing this work. And I'm so glad that we were able to have such good discussion. And I know that our presenters are more than willing to be a resource if you think of anything in the days to come. But again, as always, keep your eyes peeled on your inboxes. We'll be sending out the the recording link along with the slides in the coming days. So thank you everyone for being with us, and back to regular programming for next month on the fourth Monday, and we'll be discussing manufactured housing. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.